I went to my ex's engagement party, and his alpha brother marked me instead. Hello everyone, and welcome back. Before we dive into today's story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our new uploads. It only takes a second, it is completely free, and your support helps us continue bringing you heartfelt, dramatic, and unforgettable stories like this one. We truly appreciate every single one of you. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. We always enjoy seeing how far these stories reach and meeting viewers from across the globe. And now, without further delay, let's begin today's story. Sometimes the greatest betrayal doesn't happen when someone leaves you. It happens when you finally realize you deserved better all along. The cream-colored envelope had been sitting unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally gathered the courage to pick it up. I already knew what it was before I slid my finger beneath the seal. The elegant gold lettering on the front carried the unmistakable crest of the Sterling family, a symbol almost everyone in the city recognized. Inside was an invitation to the engagement party of Lucas Sterling, the man who had once promised we would build a future together. We had spent 3 years sharing dreams, celebrating milestones, and planning a life that suddenly disappeared with one quiet conversation only 6 months earlier. He had looked at me with calm eyes and told me that love sometimes changed. There had been no argument, no dramatic goodbye, only a silence that somehow hurt even more than shouting ever could. Friends encouraged me to throw the invitation away, but something inside me whispered that if I avoided this night, I would carry unanswered questions forever. Closure rarely arrived on its own. Sometimes you had to walk directly into the place where your heart had been broken. So on a cool Friday evening, I adjusted the sleeves of my navy suit, took one steady breath, and drove across town toward the Sterling estate. The mansion glowed beneath hundreds of warm lights, and luxury cars filled every parking space along the long circular driveway. Guests in elegant dresses and tailored suits laughed beneath strings of crystal lanterns, while soft music drifted through the summer air. I reminded myself that I belonged there just as much as anyone else. My relationship with Lucas had been real, even if it no longer existed. The moment I stepped through the grand entrance, conversations continued around me as if nothing had changed, yet I could still feel curious eyes following me. Some people offered polite smiles. Others quickly looked away, unsure whether to acknowledge the former partner standing only a few feet from the happy couple. I forced myself to smile back, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Lucas stood near the center of the ballroom, greeting guests with effortless confidence. For a brief second, our eyes met across the room. Surprise flickered across his face before it disappeared behind a practiced expression of courtesy. Before either of us could move, another presence quietly entered the room from the grand staircase above. The atmosphere shifted almost instantly. Conversations softened without anyone asking them to. Heads turned naturally toward the tall alpha, descending each polished step with calm confidence rather than arrogance. Adrian Sterling carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who never needed to demand attention because it arrived on its own. His charcoal suit fit perfectly, his silver cuff links caught the light, and his composed expression revealed almost nothing. I had only met Lucas's older brother once years ago, and even then we had exchanged little more than a handshake. Yet the instant Adrian's gaze crossed the crowded ballroom and landed on me, time itself seemed to hesitate. His confident stride slowed by a fraction. A strange uncertainty appeared in his normally unreadable eyes, as though he had sensed something impossible. I looked behind me, wondering if someone else had entered through the door, but there was no one there. When I looked back, Adrian was still staring directly at me, and for reasons I couldn't possibly explain, I felt as though tonight was about to change far more than my understanding of the past. The music continued to float through the ballroom, but for Adrian Sterling it had faded into distant background noise. Every instinct he had spent years mastering suddenly refused to obey him. He had attended political galas, charity auctions, and high-profile negotiations where the most influential alpha leaders in the country tested one another with carefully measured confidence. Yet nothing had ever unsettled him the way one quiet Omega standing near the entrance did now. Rowan Brooks looked as uncomfortable as anyone would expect after walking into the engagement celebration of the man who had once promised him forever. Even so, he stood with quiet dignity, offering polite smiles whenever another guest greeted him. He neither searched for sympathy nor demanded attention. Adrian found himself studying that calm composure far longer than he intended. Across the room, Lucas noticed his older brother's unusual silence. Adrian was normally the first to welcome important guests, but tonight he remained motionless on the staircase for several seconds before finally descending. Lucas walked toward him with an easy smile. "I did not think you would actually make it," he joked softly. Adrian barely heard him. His attention drifted back toward Rowan almost against his own will. "Who invited him?" Adrian asked quietly. Lucas glanced across the ballroom before answering. "I did. I thought it would be more respectful than pretending those years never happened." Adrian nodded, although something inside him felt unexpectedly unsettled. Respect was not the emotion he sensed lingering between Rowan and Lucas. There was sadness, acceptance, and an invisible distance that seemed impossible to bridge. Before Adrian could ask another question, one of the event organizers hurried over carrying a tray of champagne glasses. As guests shifted to make room, someone accidentally brushed the server's shoulder. The tray tilted dangerously toward Rowan. Without hesitation, Adrian stepped forward. Rowan reacted at the exact same moment, reaching instinctively to steady the falling glasses before they shattered. Across the polished marble floor, their hands met around the silver tray. Time seemed to freeze. A gentle warmth spread from the point where their fingers touched, subtle at first, then unmistakably stronger. Rowan quickly pulled his hand back, looking slightly embarrassed. "I am sorry," he said with a nervous smile. "I should have been paying more attention." "No," Adrian answered almost automatically. "You prevented an accident." The words sounded ordinary, yet Adrian's heartbeat refused to return to normal. Something invisible lingered in the air between them, something no one else appeared to notice. Rowan offered one final polite nod before excusing himself toward the outdoor garden, clearly hoping for a quieter place to breathe. Adrian watched him disappear through the glass doors. His pulse remained strangely uneven. For the first time in his life, the disciplined Alpha questioned whether his own instincts could be trusted. Several older members of the Sterling family quietly exchanged puzzled glances. They had known Adrian his entire life. They had never seen him lose focus so completely. Lucas followed Adrian's line of sight and frowned almost imperceptibly. It was only a brief moment, gone before anyone else noticed, but something deep inside him tightened with quiet uncertainty. Outside, Rowan leaned against the stone railing overlooking the gardens, grateful for the cool evening breeze. He whispered to himself that all he needed was another hour before he could leave and finally close this painful chapter of his life. Behind him, the ballroom doors slowly opened once again, and Adrian stepped into the night with an expression that suggested he was searching for answers he had never expected to need. Rowan heard the soft footsteps approaching across the stone pathway before he turned around. Adrian stopped several feet away, careful not to invade the quiet space Rowan had found beneath the string lights that overlooked the gardens. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The distant laughter from the ballroom blended with the gentle sound of water flowing from a marble fountain nearby, creating a strange contrast to the tension neither man could explain. "I hope I am not interrupting," Adrian finally said. Rowan offered a small smile. "Not at all. I just needed a little fresh air." Adrian nodded, understanding more than Rowan realized. Events like this can become overwhelming. Rowan looked toward the glowing windows of the mansion. That is one way to describe it. A faint laugh escaped before he quickly composed himself. "I honestly thought I would be stronger than this." Adrian studied him quietly. Everything he had heard about Rowan over the years had come through Lucas. Yet standing here now, Adrian realized how little he actually knew. There was no bitterness in Rowan's voice, only quiet honesty. "Leaving does not always erase the memories," Adrian said. Rowan looked surprised. "You speak as if you understand." Adrian hesitated before answering. Everyone carries something they hoped would end differently. The conversation settled into a comfortable silence. It was unexpected, especially between two people who were almost strangers. Inside the ballroom, Lucas noticed Rowan had not returned. Excusing himself from another conversation, he stepped outside and immediately found the two of them standing together beneath the lights. Although they maintained a respectful distance, something about the scene felt strangely unsettling. Adrian rarely spent time making casual conversation at social events, especially not with someone he had barely met. "There you are," Lucas called with an easy smile that sounded just a little too rehearsed. Rowan turned politely. "Congratulations again," he said sincerely. "Everything looks beautiful." Lucas thanked him, but his attention kept drifting toward Adrian, whose expression remained unusually thoughtful. "The photographer is gathering everyone for family pictures," Lucas explained while looking directly at his brother. Adrian acknowledged him with a slight nod, but did not immediately move. For the first time Lucas could remember, his older brother seemed distracted by something stronger than responsibility. As Lucas returned inside, Rowan quietly cleared his throat. "You should probably go." Adrian looked toward the ballroom before meeting Rowan's eyes again. "Probably." Yet neither of them took a step. At that exact moment, a gentle breeze carried through the garden, stirring the flowering vines climbing the stone walls. Adrian suddenly caught the same faint, unfamiliar fragrance that had unsettled him from the moment Rowan entered the estate. It was subtle, impossible to compare with any scent he had encountered before, and gone almost as quickly as it appeared. His pulse quickened without warning. Rowan noticed the slight change in Adrian's expression. "Is everything all right?" Adrian answered honestly. "I am beginning to think something impossible is happening." Rowan frowned with quiet confusion, assuming Adrian was referring to the awkward family situation. Before he could ask another question, an elderly gentleman approached from the garden path. His silver hair and formal black suit gave him an unmistakable air of dignity. Adrian immediately greeted him with respect. It was Theodore Sterling, the oldest living member of the family. Theodore's calm eyes rested on Rowan for several long seconds before shifting back to Adrian. The elderly alpha spoke only one quiet sentence, yet those few words caused every color to disappear from Adrian's face. "If you can sense it already," Theodore said softly, "then destiny has arrived much sooner than any of us expected." The words echoed in Adrian's mind long after Theodore quietly walked back toward the ballroom. Rowan watched the exchange with growing curiosity, unable to understand why one simple sentence had unsettled the most composed alpha he had ever met. "Did I miss something?" Rowan asked gently. Adrian hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There are old stories in my family that most people believe are only legends." Rowan smiled politely. "Every old family has legends." Adrian looked toward the illuminated windows of the estate before answering. "Most do. Ours has one that no one speaks about unless they have to." Before Rowan could ask another question, Theodore paused near the entrance and turned back only once. "Adrian," he called calmly, "come with me for a moment." Adrian nodded apologetically toward Rowan. "Please excuse me. I will not be long." Rowan watched him disappear inside, wondering why his arrival at an engagement party had somehow become connected to a mystery that clearly predated him by generations. Upstairs, Theodore led Adrian into the old family library, a quiet room hidden behind carved oak doors that most guests never knew existed. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with journals, photographs, and leather-bound records collected over more than a century. Theodore walked directly to a locked glass cabinet before removing a small brass key from his pocket. Inside rested a single weathered journal wrapped in dark blue cloth. "Your grandfather asked me to protect this until the right time," Theodore said as he carefully placed it on the desk. Adrian slowly opened the fragile pages. The elegant handwriting belonged to the founder of the Sterling family legacy. Near the center of the journal, one passage had been marked with faded blue ink. It read, "The sovereign mark is never awakened by beauty, status, wealth, or desire alone. It appears only when an alpha stands before the one whose presence calls him toward his highest character. The mark does not reward power. It demands responsibility." Adrian read the passage twice before lifting his eyes. "I thought this was only a myth." Theodore smiled gently. "Every generation says the same thing until someone experiences it." Adrian remained silent. "Tonight," Theodore continued, "you sensed something before any mark appeared. That has only been recorded a handful of times." Adrian closed the journal carefully. If Rowan is truly connected to this legend, then Lucas. Theodore raised a hand before Adrian finished. "Do not confuse affection with destiny. Your brother cared for him in the way he was capable of caring. That does not mean they were meant to walk the same road forever. Adrian looked back toward the ballroom below through the tall library windows. Guests continued laughing, celebrating, completely unaware that a conversation upstairs might reshape the future of one of the city's most respected alpha families. Downstairs, Rowan stood alone beside a table of white roses, quietly preparing to leave before drawing any more attention to himself. He reached for his coat, believing the evening had finally reached its natural conclusion. At that exact moment, the lights throughout the ballroom dimmed as the master of ceremonies welcomed everyone to gather for the official engagement toast. Hundreds of guests turned toward the grand staircase, just as Adrian emerged from the upper floor, holding the old blue journal in his hand, his calm expression replaced by the unmistakable determination of someone who had finally discovered a truth too important to ignore. As the applause filled the ballroom, Adrian slowly descended the grand staircase with the old journal held securely at his side. No one except Theodore understood why his expression had changed. The confidence he always carried was still there, but tonight it had been joined by something deeper, a quiet sense of purpose that even Lucas immediately recognized. Guests gathered around the crystal glasses arranged for the engagement toast while the master of ceremonies welcomed everyone with warm congratulations. Rowan remained near the edge of the room, hoping to slip away once the speeches concluded. He never wanted this evening to become about him. Lucas stepped forward beside his fiancée and thanked everyone for attending before speaking about new beginnings, family, and the future. The audience responded with generous applause, yet Adrian found himself watching only one person. Rowan politely joined the applause with everyone else, genuinely wishing Lucas happiness despite the lingering sadness in his own heart. That simple act struck Adrian more deeply than any grand speech ever could. The journal had described a person whose character inspired an alpha to become better, not someone who demanded attention. Standing quietly in the crowd after enduring heartbreak, Rowan somehow embodied every word written on those aged pages. When the toast ended, guests began circulating through the ballroom once again. Rowan quietly reached for his coat, believing this was finally the right moment to leave unnoticed. Before he reached the exit, Adrian approached with calm, measured steps. "Are you leaving already?" he asked. Rowan smiled. Politely, "I think it is time. I came here looking for closure, and maybe I found enough of it." Adrian nodded with understanding. "Would you allow me to walk you outside?" Rowan looked surprised but agreed. Neither of them noticed the curious glances following them as they crossed the ballroom together. Outside, the cool evening air carried the scent of blooming jasmine across the gardens. For a while they simply walked along the stone pathway in comfortable silence. Finally Rowan spoke. "You have been unusually kind to someone you barely know." Adrian smiled faintly. "Perhaps I am only beginning to know you." Rowan looked down with a quiet laugh. "That sounds like something from an old novel." "Maybe the old novels understood people better than we give them credit for," Adrian replied. Rowan felt himself relaxing for the first time that evening. There was no pressure in Adrian's voice, no hidden expectation, only sincere respect. It reminded him of something he had almost forgotten could exist after the painful end of his previous relationship. As they reached the front entrance, Rowan stopped beside his car. "Thank you," he said honestly. "Tonight became much easier because of you." Adrian answered with equal sincerity. "I should be thanking you." Rowan tilted his head with gentle confusion. "For what?" Adrian glanced briefly toward the journal still resting beneath his arm before looking back into Rowan's eyes. "For reminding me that strength is not measured by how much authority someone holds. Sometimes it is measured by how gracefully they carry disappointment." Rowan stood speechless for several seconds. No one had ever described him that way before. At that exact moment, Theodore quietly watched them through the mansion window. Beside him stood another elderly member of the Sterling family, who noticed the journal in Adrian's hand and sighed softly. "It has finally begun," the older alpha murmured. Theodore nodded without taking his eyes off the pair outside. "Yes," he replied. "And now the greatest test will not be whether the sovereign mark appears. It will be whether Adrian has the wisdom to wait until Rowan chooses him freely." The engagement party became the talk of the city before the weekend was over, although no one outside the Sterling family knew the real reason. Guests remembered Adrian spending far more time speaking with Rowan than anyone expected, and whispers quietly spread through business circles, charity boards, and private social clubs. Most people dismissed the rumors as harmless speculation, but inside the Sterling family, silence replaced gossip. Theodore returned the ancient journal to its locked cabinet without another word, leaving Adrian alone to wrestle with questions that no modern alpha had faced in generations. 3 days later, Adrian found himself standing outside a small independent bookstore on the quiet corner of Maple Avenue. Theodore had not told him where Rowan worked, yet a brief conversation with one of the family assistants revealed that Rowan volunteered there every Wednesday evening, helping children choose books after school. Adrian remained in his car for several minutes, debating whether he should leave. The journal echoed inside his thoughts. The sovereign mark demanded responsibility before destiny. If he truly believed those words, then he could not allow curiosity to become pressure. Finally, he stepped inside. The warm scent of old books and fresh coffee filled the cozy shop. Children's laughter drifted from the reading corner, where Rowan sat on a colorful rug surrounded by half a dozen smiling children. Instead of reading dramatically, Rowan invited each child to imagine how the story might end before turning every page. Their excitement filled the room with genuine joy. Adrian quietly watched from a distance, unnoticed. He realized that Rowan treated every child with the same kindness he had shown strangers at the engagement party. There was nothing performative about it. This was simply who he was. Nearly an hour passed before the children left with their parents. Rowan looked up while organizing returned books and froze for a moment when he recognized Adrian. "I was not expecting to see you here," he admitted with a surprised smile. Adrian returned the smile. "Neither was I, if I am being honest." Rowan laughed softly. "That is an interesting answer." Adrian glanced around the peaceful bookstore. "I wanted to thank you again for the other night, but I did not want to interrupt your evening." Rowan leaned against a nearby bookshelf. "You waited almost an hour." Adrian nodded. "You were busy doing something important." Rowan looked genuinely touched. Most people saw his volunteer work as a pleasant hobby. Adrian had noticed its value without being told. They spoke for nearly another hour about books, childhood memories, favorite places to travel, and dreams they had quietly set aside. Not once did Adrian mention Lucas, the engagement party, or the strange family legend. Rowan noticed that absence more than anything else. For the first time since the relationship ended, someone seemed interested in knowing him instead of discussing his past. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Rowan looked toward the quiet street lined with glowing storefronts. "Thank you for today," he said sincerely. "It was nice having a conversation that did not begin with sympathy." Adrian smiled. "I was never interested in your past. I wanted to know the person standing in front of me." Rowan lowered his eyes for a brief second, feeling warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with alpha instincts. Across the street, hidden behind the tinted windows of a parked black sedan, Lucas watched the entire conversation unfold. He had told himself he came only by coincidence. Yet as he saw Rowan laughing in a way he had not laughed for months, an uncomfortable truth quietly settled into his heart. For the first time since ending their relationship, Lucas realized that losing Rowan might not have been the greatest mistake of his life. It might have been the beginning of someone else's future. The following week, the Sterling Foundation hosted its annual Community Scholarship Banquet, an event that brought together business leaders, teachers, volunteers, and hundreds of local families. Unlike the formal engagement celebration, the atmosphere felt welcoming rather than intimidating. Rowan had been invited because the bookstore's literacy program had been selected to receive a grant for expanding children's reading activities throughout the city. He almost declined the invitation, worried that another Sterling event might reopen old wounds, but the children had worked too hard to lose such an opportunity. When he arrived at the convention hall, he was relieved to discover that the evening focused entirely on community service instead of social status. Volunteers displayed photographs of neighborhood projects while students proudly presented artwork inspired by their favorite books. Rowan smiled as several children from the bookstore ran over to greet him with excited waves. Across the room, Adrian watched the interaction with quiet admiration. Every time he saw Rowan, he discovered another reason people naturally trusted him. Theodore's words continued to echo in his thoughts. The sovereign mark was not about finding perfection. It was about recognizing someone whose character inspired others to become better. As the evening progressed, the host invited Adrian to present the foundation's highest community leadership award, an honor traditionally chosen by the Sterling family. Everyone expected the recipient to be a prominent executive or wealthy donor. Adrian stepped onto the stage with his usual calm confidence and looked across the audience before speaking. Real leadership is not measured by influence, titles, or recognition, he said. It is measured by the quiet choices people make when no one expects applause. Curious whispers spread across the room. Adrian continued, "This year's recipient has spent years helping children discover confidence through books, imagination, and kindness. He has never asked for attention. He simply believed every child deserved someone who believed in them." Rowan looked around in confusion, assuming Adrian was describing another volunteer. Then Adrian smiled warmly and said, "Please join me in congratulating Rowan Brooks." The audience erupted into enthusiastic applause. Rowan remained frozen for a moment before the children from the bookstore began cheering his name. Embarrassed but smiling, he slowly walked toward the stage. Adrian handed him the Crystal Award with genuine respect rather than ceremony. "You earned this," Adrian said, quietly enough that only Rowan could hear. "Not because I know you, but because your work speaks for itself." Rowan accepted the award with grateful eyes. "Thank you," he replied softly. "I never imagined anyone noticed." Adrian answered with complete sincerity. The people who change lives rarely realize how many hearts they have already reached. Among the guests, Lucas watched the exchange in silence. He suddenly remembered the countless evenings Rowan had volunteered at the bookstore while he had dismissed those hours as an insignificant hobby. Only now did he understand that Rowan had never needed recognition to make a difference. The realization filled him with quiet regret. Later that evening, after the ceremony concluded, several board members congratulated Adrian on selecting such an unexpected recipient. Theodore simply smiled, knowing the choice revealed far more than anyone else understood. As Rowan and Adrian stood together speaking with children and volunteers, an elderly historian attending the banquet noticed the two of them from across the hall. His expression slowly changed as though he had recognized something from an old forgotten record. Walking toward Theodore, he spoke in a careful whisper. "If those two continue walking this path together," he said, "the sovereign mark will not remain a legend much longer. It will reveal itself for everyone to see." The scholarship banquet marked a quiet turning point that neither Rowan nor Adrian fully recognized at first. Over the following weeks, they continued seeing each other through community projects rather than formal social gatherings. Adrian began volunteering at the bookstore every Saturday morning, not because anyone expected him to, but because he genuinely enjoyed watching children discover stories that encouraged courage, kindness, and hope. The first time he sat on the reading rug surrounded by curious young listeners, everyone expected the distinguished alpha to appear awkward. Instead, he patiently acted out different characters, answered endless questions, and laughed whenever the children corrected his dramatic voices. Rowan watched from nearby with a smile that grew warmer each week. The powerful businessman the city admired and the gentle volunteer sitting cross-legged on the floor somehow felt like the same person. Their friendship developed naturally, built through ordinary conversations over coffee, shared meals after volunteer events, and long walks through neighborhood parks where neither of them needed to pretend to be anyone else. Adrian never mentioned the ancient journal again. He never spoke about destiny or legends. He honored Theodore's advice by allowing Rowan complete freedom to choose every step of their growing relationship. That quiet patience slowly dissolved the invisible walls Rowan had built around his heart after the painful ending with Lucas. For the first time in many months, Rowan found himself looking forward to tomorrow instead of replaying yesterday. Meanwhile, Lucas struggled with feelings he had not expected. Watching Rowan become happier without him forced Lucas to examine his own choices with complete honesty. During a private conversation with Theodore, he admitted, "I thought loving someone meant keeping them close to me." Theodore answered gently, "Keeping someone close is easy. Helping them become their happiest self is much harder." Those words stayed with Lucas for days. Instead of competing with his older brother, he made an unexpected decision. He visited the bookstore one afternoon while Adrian was attending a business meeting. Rowan welcomed him politely, though both men understood the conversation would not be easy. Lucas apologized without excuses or attempts to rewrite the past. He admitted that he had often valued expectations more than genuine partnership and confessed that seeing Rowan smile again had shown him what real love should have wanted all along. Rowan listened quietly before offering a peaceful smile. "I spent a long time wondering why everything happened the way it did," he said. "Now I think we both needed to grow into different people." They shook hands not as former partners carrying bitterness, but as two people finally releasing the weight of old regrets. Unknown to them, Adrian arrived outside just in time to witness the respectful farewell through the bookstore window. Instead of feeling jealousy, he experienced quiet admiration for both of them. At that very moment, a gentle warmth spread across his wrist beneath the sleeve of his jacket. Startled, Adrian looked down and noticed the faint outline of a silver pattern beginning to shimmer against his skin before fading almost as quickly as it had appeared. It was not a complete mark, only the briefest glimpse of one. Theodore had once written a note beneath the journal's final page, explaining that the sovereign mark always revealed itself gradually, appearing only after forgiveness had replaced resentment in every heart connected to its story. Adrian slowly looked toward Rowan, who was laughing peacefully inside the bookstore, completely unaware that the first sign of an ancient promise had finally awakened. 1 year passed more quickly than either of them expected. The bookstore had expanded into a citywide literacy program supported by the Sterling Foundation, providing books, reading mentors, and educational events for thousands of children across the community. Rowan had become the program's director, not because he sought recognition, but because his quiet compassion inspired countless volunteers to believe that small acts of kindness could change lives. Adrian remained beside him throughout every step of that journey. He never attempted to rush destiny or demand certainty. Instead, he continued showing up every Saturday morning, reading stories to children, carrying heavy boxes of donated books, and listening whenever Rowan shared another dream for helping families discover the joy of learning together. Their relationship grew stronger through ordinary moments rather than dramatic declarations. The city gradually stopped talking about the engagement party that had once fueled endless rumors. Instead, people began speaking about the Alpha and the Omega who had transformed community service into something that united neighborhoods regardless of status or background. Even Lucas found peace with the past. He became one of the literacy program's largest private donors, quietly supporting the mission without seeking public credit. The bitterness that once connected all three of them had disappeared, replaced by mutual respect and sincere gratitude for the different paths life had chosen. On a warm spring afternoon, the Sterling Foundation organized the grand opening of a new children's learning center built beside the original bookstore. Families gathered across the lawn while students performed music and volunteers celebrated another successful year of community service. Theodore stood near the entrance with the ancient journal tucked safely beneath his arm, smiling as he watched history unfold once again. During the ceremony, Rowan stepped onto the stage to thank everyone who had believed in the project from the beginning. As he finished speaking, he turned toward Adrian with quiet appreciation. Adrian slowly walked forward, not carrying flowers, expensive gifts, or symbols of family authority. Instead, he held a simple handwritten letter folded inside an ordinary envelope. "There was a time when I believed strength came from responsibility alone," Adrian said calmly before the gathered crowd. "Then I met someone who taught me that true strength is measured by kindness, patience, forgiveness, and the courage to help others without expecting anything in return." He looked directly into Rowan's eyes. "I do not stand here because of an ancient legend. I do not stand here because of family tradition. I stand here because every ordinary day with you has become the happiest part of my life. Rowan Brooks, I choose you today, and I will choose you again tomorrow, and every day after that, as long as you will have me." Rowan's eyes filled with quiet emotion as he accepted the letter instead of immediately answering. Inside, Adrian had written every reason he admired Rowan, not one of them mentioning destiny or the sovereign mark. Before Rowan could speak, a gentle silver light slowly appeared across Adrian's wrist, continuing gracefully onto Rowan's hand as their fingers naturally intertwined. The delicate pattern shimmered for only a few peaceful moments before settling into a permanent mark unlike anything the gathered witnesses had ever seen. Theodore quietly opened the ancient journal to its final page, where one forgotten sentence completed the legend at last. The sovereign mark is never created by power. It appears only after two hearts freely choose one another. Rowan smiled through grateful tears and answered with complete certainty. My answer has never been about fate. It has always been about the man you chose to become. As the audience erupted into heartfelt applause, Adrian gently embraced Rowan, not as an alpha claiming someone, but as a partner honoring an equal. In that moment, the oldest legend of the Sterling family revealed its greatest truth. Love did not become extraordinary because of a mark. The mark existed only to recognize a love that had already been built through trust, compassion, forgiveness, and the daily choice to become better together.